Now, the front page of the Daily Mail this morning is quite shocking. Nick police searches broke the law. Bombshell as judge behind inquiry reveals perversion of justice. He tells the Daily Mail officers got search warrants using false evidence, but says his damning findings were ignored by police watchdog. This is a guy who did a report 3 years ago, delivered it to Bernard Hogan Howe. Sir Richard Henriques is his name. He's a former High Court judge. He made all manner of recommendations, most of which have still remained private and have not been published and brought into the public eye. Today, he's broken his own silence and come out with some absolutely incredible things, including the fact that he thinks that the warrants that were obtained to search various homes of people like Harvey Proctor and Leon Britton were in fact obtained erroneously, obtained by default, because they were not actually in any way backed up by what they should have had as evidence. Let's talk to Peter Hitchens, a columnist for the Mail on Sunday, a man who's followed this story from the beginning. Peter, very good morning to you. Welcome.
Good morning.
Thanks very much for joining us. I mean, these are startling revelations from a retired High Court judge who's effectively saying that individual police officers certainly, and possibly the police force in general, was involved in perverting the course of justice here.
I think it is astonishing that a person of the qualifications, experience of Sir Richard Henriques should feel it necessary to say such a thing in public. I've never seen anything like it in my life. People of this kind generally are very discreet about their criticisms, word them with extreme caution, and have for a long time been extremely supportive of the police for the simple reason that the criminal justice system has to be. And quite rightly, it would never have been a good thing under normal circumstances for anyone so high on the judge's bench to say anything so shocking about the police and their behaviour, unless something had gone very seriously wrong.
And he does. And
the point is here that something has gone very seriously wrong with our country and with the police. And for this to happen, it's a sign, it seems to me, of the unobserved revolution which is taking place in this country, in which the police are playing a particularly important part. They've ceased to be the body which we used to know and trust, and have become something entirely different and a law unto themselves. And what I would say here is that if Sir Richard's words are not heeded and if action is not taken, then we will all live to regret it. What I've said from the beginning of this is that if someone such as Edwin Bramall, a D-Day veteran, the most senior military officer in the country, a man of unimpeachable honesty and honour, is not safe from being pilloried in public by police searches based on the most pathetic and obviously contradictory allegations, then nobody is safe. If somebody of his authority, experience and standing can have his house invaded by 20 police officers in search outfits who then fan out into the small village where he lives, so it's perfectly obvious that he's under investigation, and has to put up with the consequences of this for months while his wife is actually dying. If someone like that is not safe, then nobody is safe, and everybody should be alarmed. There is nobody against whom some completely baseless allegation cannot be made, whom the police cannot then ruin. And if it hadn't been for the fact that Edwin Bramall and a number of other people had managed to find the power and the friends and the strength to resist, this would have carried on, and their reputations would have been ruined. I've played some small part in a much, much smaller, less well-known case of somebody who was accused of paedophilia after his death, and it was extraordinary, the battle that one had to fight simply to establish the starting point of English justice, which is that nobody is guilty until they've been proven guilty. And what the police do now is they completely anticipate courts, juries, even the Crown Prosecution Service. They themselves act as judge and jury, and they punish people, and they have the power to do so. And I'm afraid they're overmighty subjects. And if Sir Richard's advice to have serious inquiry into this and to look into the possibility of prosecuting some of those involved is not followed, then we will lose our liberty in this country.
I think you're absolutely right.
It's a crucial moment in our history.
I think you're absolutely right, Peter, and we have to pay very close attention to it, because one of the allegations, just one of the allegations in Sir Richard's piece in the Mail today, refers to the applications for the search warrants themselves, yes, for Lady Britton, for Lady Bramall and for Harvey Proctor's house, all obtained, he says, unlawfully, because the police application stated that Beech had remained consistent in all of his allegations, which he clearly hadn't.
Well, he absolutely hadn't. He said completely opposite things about the first first offence which he alleged had been committed against him. And let's not get involved. I must say this, you probably know this, but in naming the individual officers involved at this stage,
no,
because
sure.
this could develop into something quite serious, and we don't want to make any prejudicial remarks. But what I do recommend all your listeners to get hold of, it's available online, Sir Richard's article, and to read what he says about how those warrants were obtained and why he believes that it was illegitimate that they were obtained. They were issued correctly by the judge on the basis of what he believed to be true, because he thought the police could be trusted in this case. And that's the problem. What we have done in this country for so many years is to trust the police on the basis of a reputation they gained 50 years ago in another age, which in my view they simply no longer deserve. And I used to be hesitant about criticising the police. I would say, which is true, there are many good people in the police force, and I would say that in general the police force is a good thing. I continue to say there are many good people in the police force, because there obviously are, but in fact I now increasingly regard the police forces in England, Wales and Scotland as both inefficient and oppressive organisations which require reform so deep that they would be unrecognisable at the end of it. I'm astonished that this hasn't come up before, but now that it has, everybody concerned with the liberty of the subject, everybody concerned actually with any kind of freedom at all, and with continuing to live in a country where we are not completely under the thumb of the state and of lawless authority, should be supporting Sir Richard Henriques and recognising that if a man of this quality, standing and experience says this, what he recommends must be done.
But what do you think, Peter, going back to your suggestion that something has gone wrong at the heart of our society, which I totally agree with you about, by the way, what do you think it is? I mean, is it simply that the police like to prosecute what they would regard as members of the establishment who happen to be Tories? Is it political? What is it?
So let me say from the start that none of us doubts that there are paedophiles in our society, and none of us wishes anything other than that they should be caught and prosecuted and punished when found guilty.
Yeah.
Because there is this nasty tendency among people in this campaign to suggest that anybody who opposes the sort of action taken is a friend of the paedophile.
Of course, yeah. But that's modern. That's the modern world, isn't it?
Of a particular politician who's kind of spread that word about. But
he's the man who blocked me. He's the man. Let me just say this: he's the man who blocked me on Twitter for asking what he'd done with the 500,000 quid he got from Max Mosley.
Well, yes, indeed. But let's keep off him for the moment. He's another subject for another day.
Yeah.
But the point is this: this is the moment anybody stands up to any one of these no smoke without fire pursuits of individuals. The moment this happens, the insinuation is made. Oh, are you one of them too? Why are you defending these people? As if they've already been found guilty, which they haven't been, and as if that would be my motive. There has been for a long time in the minds of certain left-wing people a fantasy that at the top of society there is some vast paedophile conspiracy and cover-up. For all I know, such a thing may have taken place. I've yet to see any hard evidence to suggest that it's so. But it's for a very long time driven a lot of people on there. What happened with the police was that they were taken over by the great cultural revolution of the 1960s. It began before the Macpherson Report, but after the Macpherson Report, it accelerated greatly. So the police in their upper ranks were increasingly taken over with people who are probably more left-wing in their views than I was when I was a Trotskyist in the 1960s. And that is the problem. They don't realize, they probably don't even know the origins of the ideas which they propagate. But they've become fanatical egalitarians. They believe that they've bought into the myth of the establishment conspiracy. They wanted to believe all this stuff that Carl Beech came to them.
Yeah.
They really, just as other police wanted to believe all that mad stuff about Ted Heath that was also put about. They wanted to believe it. If you want to believe something, then you lose all discrimination. But the problem was that it wasn't just individuals wanting to believe this. Institutionally, the police are now so politically correct that the fact that some individuals might have wanted to believe it was not checked at any stage. No senior officer stepped forward and said, "You can't do this. This is obviously ludicrous," because they all believe it. Because it's part of this penetration. Just as the police will wholly now against the old style of policing, which involved the prevention and detection of crime and the punishment of criminals, and when the police identify with the law-abiding section of the population. Now the police, if the recurrent example which comes up again and again, if somebody defends his home against a burglar, and in the course of this injures the burglar. It is the person in the home who the police pursue. Because they don't really believe that anybody has the freedom to defend himself, particularly with any force against crime, and they really hate any idea of their own monopoly of law enforcement being challenged by a better version. So they are not the servants of the people. They are the servants of a politically correct ideology. And this comes out in all manner of ways, but it comes out particularly in the way in which they pursued Lord Bramall and Lord Britton and Harvey Proctor and Ted Heath, that there is politics in this. It isn't just that you're dealing with people who aren't very bright. It is politics.
They've taken
that's why it has to be tackled in a political way.
There's no doubt they've taken a series of decisions which have been based around what you just said, their belief that these people were guilty. Surely now then the Home Office has to get involved, doesn't it?
Well, it's all kinds of people have to get involved, but it's really what's required is an absolute top to bottom inquiry into the police and their effectiveness. Because I think that there is a huge discontent among the British public about the police. I mean, my standard joke about the police is if they were all abducted by aliens, how long would it take for most of us to notice? Because they are so absent from the streets in the role in which they're supposed to be, that it's very difficult to work out what it is they're doing, which is why I always mock Al Johnson's call for 20,000 more police officers. You could have 1 million more police officers, but as long as they continue to do whatever it is they're doing, we never see them. They hide away somewhere, and they're not there.
Well, a good place to start looking for them is
they've ceased to be our servants, and they've served something else. So there needs to be, in my view, I would know that one needs to go back to all the sensible rules which we used to have: small, local, responsive police forces instead of the unresponsive, distant, merged ones which date from 1967. Would be a big step forward, and the end of this ridiculous suggestion that somehow or other somebody who's a sociology graduate is going to make a better senior officer than somebody who's come up through years of policing. These things need to be changed, but fundamentally what they need to do is go back on foot patrol, preventing crime, which is what they're good at, instead of choosing which crimes to pursue after they've been committed, which is useless. Think about it. A question I always ask to people: what use, unless he's particularly good or she is particularly good at first aid, what use is a police officer after a crime has been committed? He cannot unburgle you. He cannot unmug you. He cannot unstab you. The thing has already happened. The point of the police was always, and they were set up by Robert Peel for this purpose, to prevent crime. And they prevent crime by being present, and they're absent. And this whole thing, they were the servants of the, I would say, the respectable, by no means the rich, because the respectable poor very much relied on the police to protect them. They were the servants of the respectable and the law-abiding, and they've now become the servants of the politically correct ideology. And this stuff about pursuing high-level allegations of paedophilia among the elite and field marshals and cabinet ministers is an example of just how badly they've gone wrong.
Well, exactly right. And so much time was wasted in the Houses of Parliament over this. So much time was wasted on a particular radio station that I don't like to mention here. Also, if you want to find out where the police are, just go and check out where the next Extinction Rebellion, sit-in is happening, and you'll find loads of them there dancing about. We were so surprised to see the police operating like they used to last week when Boris Johnson was on his way to Buckingham Palace and those Greenpeace supporters got pushed out of the way by one of the cops on a motorbike. Because we don't see that anymore. You don't normally see police actually acting like police.
This for me is a crucial distinction. In Britain, or in England anyway, what the police should do if someone gets in the way is they should get off their motorbike, they should go to the person and say, "Excuse me, you're obstructing the highway, please move." Yeah. And if they won't move, they should then pull them away. It's in totalitarian countries that they just biff people out of the way. And that looked more like Kazakhstan than England to me. And they did this shockingly to perfectly legitimate peaceful protesters against the Chinese President Xi when he visited a few years ago. Protesters against China's rape of Tibet were barged out of the way by tiny little people, by the way, barged out of the way by huge police officers in body armor. In a way which seemed to me to be quite wrong. No, in England we pull them out of the way rather than barging. So don't get too keen on that.
Well, I'd rather that than dancing with them, though, Peter.
The legitimate process doesn't require aggressive violence. The legitimate process requires, first of all, a polite request to move, and then you pull them out of the way. It just struck me as wrong.
Well, OK, but we could differ on that because the thing was, this was the next Prime Minister sitting in a car which was stationary, which is apparently a terrorist attack problem. But anyway, listen, Peter, thank you very much for talking to us. Peter Hitchens, columnist for the Mail on Sunday, telling us what he thinks has gone wrong with the police force in this country, or the police service as it is now called. But the judge in this case, Sir Richard Henriques, is now calling for an investigation, a criminal investigation, into what happened over the Carl Beech case. And I can't imagine why there should not be a proper investigation. I can't imagine how the police can continue to hide behind the idea that they all thought this guy was telling the truth. It was very obvious to almost anyone who was watching him that he was not telling the truth. He was inconsistent. His allegations were all over the place. He said one thing happened when it didn't. He said another thing happened when it did. He got it all wrong when he was talking from one investigation to another. It's absolutely staggering that this has happened. It's a massive story, let me tell you. And I want to hear from you on it. 0344 499 1000 is the number, because, of course, we all see the police on a day-to-day basis. Some of us would have a great deal of time for the police and the hard work that they do. We talk about that a lot on this show. But in this case, and the people who are running the police in this country are clearly politically motivated, and that is a problem. It's a massive problem.